Welcome to Stats 101, everyone. Grab a seat, get comfortable, and get ready, because I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide for today's session. You're definitely going to want your notebooks for this one, as we're about to unlock what is arguably the most powerful tool in any researcher's entire arsenal. You see, as first-year university students stepping into the wild world of research, you are immediately faced with a seemingly impossible problem. How on earth do you study an entire universe of people, objects, or events without, spending your entire lifetime doing it? Well, that's exactly what this explainer is going to solve for you. Today, we are demystifying sampling methods, giving you the vital toolkit you need to conquer that impossible problem once and for all.
So, here's our syllabus for today's explainer. First up, welcome to the universe. Second, probability. Third, scaling up. Fourth, non-probability. And finally, we'll wrap things up with the final exam.
All right, let's dive right in. Section 1. Welcome to the universe.
Okay, so before we figure out the how, we really got to nail down the what. We'll start with the universe. Now, I know that sounds incredibly dramatic, but it's really just our statistical term for the total population you want to study. It could be literally all the stars in a galaxy or, just all the coffee drinkers right here on campus. The sample, on the other hand, is just the fraction of that universe you actually select to study. And why do we do this? Well, because tracking down and interviewing every single coffee drinker on campus is simply impractical. Sampling is literally the only realistic way to study these massive populations.
Now, listen up, because this concept isn't just a basic definition, it's the golden rule of sampling. I want you to basically sear this quote into your memory. The entire foundation of statistical surveys rests on the assumption that your sample actually reflects your universe. If you follow the right methods, you can make perfectly valid inferences about 1 million people just by talking to 1,000 of them. It's like magic, but it's math. The ultimate goal here, the absolute holy grail of everything we're talking about, is avoiding bias.
So how do we dodge that bias? Well, we have to choose our methods very carefully. You can think of our sampling family tree as splitting into 2 giant branches. Over on the left, we've got probability sampling methods, where every single item has a known, totally equal chance of being selected. It is completely random. Then over on the right, we have non-probability sampling methods. These rely on purposive, deliberate selection. The big flashing neon sign difference you need to remember here is all about control. Is mathematical chance in control, or is the human investigator calling the shots?
Which brings us to Section 2, probability, where everyone gets an equal chance.
Let's start with the branch where we step back and let math do all the heavy lifting. The most famous method here is simple random sampling. Think of this basically as the lottery method. It's best used for homogeneous groups, meaning the population is generally pretty similar. Usually we pull this off using a random number generator, and honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the sheer beauty of pure probability because it guarantees absolute equality. Every single item in your universe has the exact same chance of being picked. It's completely blind and perfectly fair.
But hey, what if you need just a little more structure in your life? That is exactly where systematic sampling comes in. Step 1, you arrange your population in a specific order. Maybe that's alphabetically, or maybe it's geographically down a street. Step 2, you use a random number to pick your very first starting unit. And step 3, you select the rest at fixed intervals. So imagine you're a researcher walking down a massive suburban street. You roll a die, you get a 4, so you start at the 4th house, and from then on, you knock on every 10th house. It introduces this really nice, reliable rhythm to your random selection.
Okay, but what happens when your population is messy, non-uniform, like a university filled with freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors who all have vastly different opinions? For that, we use stratified sampling. We take that chaotic, non-homogeneous population and we organize it into neat, non-overlapping, homogeneous subpopulations. We call these strata. Once everyone is sorted into their specific stratum, then we randomly select individuals from each group. It's a fantastic way to guarantee that every single subgroup has a voice in the final sample.
Now, cluster sampling. It sounds kind of similar to stratified, but there is a huge fundamental difference here. Instead of sorting people into uniform groups, we divide the population into heterogeneous groups called clusters. Think of a cluster as a tiny mini representation of the whole universe. The twist? Instead of picking a few individuals from every single group, we randomly select a few entire clusters and study absolutely everyone inside them all at once.
Moving right along to Section 3, let's talk about scaling things up for large surveys.
I can literally hear some of you wondering right now, Professor, how on earth do we apply these rules when our universe is the size of an entire country? Well, when our research requires us to map out incredibly wide physical territories, area sampling is absolutely our go-to tool. It is essentially cluster sampling, but applied to geography.
You take a massive map, divide the total area into smaller manageable blocks, and then randomly select a suitable number of those blocks. Once you've picked your specific areas, you go in and examine all the units within them. It completely saves you from having to zigzag randomly across an entire continent.
But what if the scale is truly gigantic, like a national census? That's when we bring in the heavy artillery, multi-stage sampling. This is a highly ambitious, complex method where researchers conquer a massive country by stepping down in stages. First, you randomly select states. Then, within those states, you select districts. Within those districts, towns, and finally families. It acts just like a funnel. And because we're moving through all these different stages, the probability of selection no longer needs to be exactly the same for every single family in the country.
Which brings us to Section 4, non-probability, and making deliberate choices.
Okay, we're going to leave pure mathematical chance in the rearview mirror for a second. Non-probability sampling means the investigator is using their own discretion to deliberately select items. This is a crucial mental shift for you guys to make. In this branch of the family tree, we are willingly sacrificing that beautiful, perfectly equal probability we just talked about. Why would we do that? Because sometimes you just don't need a perfectly randomized snapshot of the whole universe. Sometimes you need highly specific information from very specific people.
Now, to help you keep all this straight for midterms, I put together this little professor's recap study guide. We've got the 3 main non-probability methods right here side by side: convenience, judgment, and quota. I highly recommend taking a mental snapshot of how they differ in their process and key features, and let's quickly break them down one by one.
First up is convenience sampling. And honestly, it is exactly what it sounds like. Items are selected purely based on ease of access for you, the investigator. Imagine you want to survey people who buy petrol. The absolute easiest way to do that? Just walk down to the nearest petrol pump station and interview whoever happens to pull up. It's fast, it's cheap, and it is incredibly easy. But, and this is a big but, as researchers, we have to be incredibly cautious here. Because it's based entirely on who just happens to be nearby, the potential for heavily skewed, massively biased results is huge.
Next on the list is judgment sampling. This is where we lean heavily, and I mean heavily, on expertise. The investigator deliberately uses their own personal judgment to select a sample that they believe represents the population. Now, you aren't doing this to mathematically generalize to a massive population. Instead, you'll commonly see this used in qualitative research to build and develop a brand new hypothesis. It relies entirely on an educated guess from someone who knows the field intimately.
And finally, the one that always seems to trip up first-year students, quota sampling. It sounds a bit like stratified sampling at first glance, right? The population gets divided into homogeneous groups, and interviewers are given strict numerical quotas to fill for each of those groups. But here is the crucial point. How do they actually fill those quotas? The final selection of the individual item is left entirely up to the interviewer's personal judgment. They might need 10 coffee drinkers, but exactly which 10 is totally up to them. No random numbers involved whatsoever.
And that brings us to Section 5. Don't panic, it's just called the final exam.
All right, let's tie this whole explainer together. You can relax, no Scantrons today, but these 4 takeaways are your ultimate foundation. Number 1, sampling is exactly what makes studying this massive universe of ours actually manageable. 2, probability methods rely entirely on math and guarantee equal chances. 3, non-probability methods rely on the investigator's deliberate personal discretion. And 4, no matter which tool you pull from your toolkit, your ultimate overarching goal is to make valid inferences with absolutely zero bias. Guys, this isn't just dry theory. This is the foundational knowledge that is going to dictate the quality of literally every research paper you write in your academic careers. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you all with a bit of a challenge. You are stepping out into a fast-paced, highly digital world that is absolutely overflowing with quick, easily accessible, but completely subjective, convenient samples. It seems like everyone has a quick poll or a skewed survey to share. So, when it's your turn to actually design a study, which method are you going to rely on to guarantee your research cuts through all that noise, avoids the bias, and uncovers the actual truth? Think very carefully about your toolkit, class. Happy researching!